Welcome to episode 13 of Podnutz. This episode's called Symptoms and Solutions. We're going to be joined with Mike Petro from Petro Computer Solutions, and we're going to cover symptoms that you're probably going to run into in doing computer repair and the solutions to those symptoms so you get them fixed. For those of you joining us for the first time, thanks for listening. As you guys know, we're a relatively young podcast, and we're always trying to increase our subscriber base. So something if you could do that really help us, if you're listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, is go to the place where you found the podcast, be it iTunes or maybe a podcast directory or the Zune Marketplace, and leave a review if possible. I know not all sites allow that or have that option, but if they do, we would appreciate it very much. It would help us out a lot, too. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do that at twitter.com/podnutz. Okay, let's get right into the podcast. You're here with Mike Petro from Petro Computer Solutions. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for joining us. Now we're going to get right into some symptoms that you will encounter doing computer repair and their respective solutions. Here we go. Okay, first symptom. Your computer does not power on, no lights or no indication of power. So in other words, you press the power button and it's dead. You don't hear any noises. You don't see any lights. In that case, you're almost definitely looking at a power supply problem. The power supply is probably bad.
Most of the times, yeah, it's usually bad. The quick way to test that is either to swap it out with another power supply, or what I recently bought was a power supply test unit, and they can be had for under $10. I think I paid $6.95 for mine, and it just hooks up with the ATX plugs, the 20-pin ATX or 24-pin, depending on power supply, the 4-pin Molex, the 4-pin CPU power, and you plug it into this little box, and it gives you status lights.
Where did you get one for under $10?
I actually got it at Micro Center. It was an old CompUSA stock.
Do they have any more of them?
I don't know. They might. This was like when Micro Center first bought all CompUSA stuff.
Yeah.
I think even if you don't pay that cheap, it's...
I'm seeing them for $24 for the kind you said. I bought one for like $7.99.
Right.
But all it had was a 20-pin connector on it. Didn't have the Molex. Didn't have anything else. It fell apart. It was a piece of crap. I threw it out. But, so
this thing's worked for me pretty good.
Well, no, if it's on sale, $7.99 is a great deal if you could find one for that price. I've seen them for $24.99. I was going to buy one the other day, but
even if it was $25, I'd probably buy it.
Yeah, I would too.
Because it would save me the trouble. It's very compact. It's about 3 by 4 inches.
Yeah.
And I'd rather carry that in my bag and keep it part of my toolbox, if you will, than to have to lug a power supply around just in case.
Definitely. It's definitely something you should have in your toolbox. Another thing it could possibly be, and this happened to me one time, and I went and bought a power supply, and it was not the problem, is the actual power button is bad. Either it's something's wrong with it mechanically, or the wires that it connects it to the motherboard aren't making a connection. Mm-hmm. So if you see dents in the front of the computer, or the power button seems like mangled or messed up in any way, it might be the power button, but you're looking at a very high chance that it's actually just the power supply.
A quick way to test the power button out is if you crack the case open, you'll see that the power button basically just shorts 2 leads out. And if you're familiar with the motherboard, you're going to see all your front panel connections for the case: power, reset, hard drive light, etc. You're just going to, what I do is just take a Phillips head, because it's got a kind of like a pointed round head, and you can just take the plug off for the power supply and just touch the 2 probes together with the screwdriver.
You mean take the power button?
Take the terminal off the motherboard where the power supply hooks up to, and they're usually labeled. You'll see power SW.
Oh, power switch. Power switch, not power supply.
Right, this is for your power switch that you're talking about. If the power switch is bad, just tap those 2 connectors, short them out, just with the end of a screwdriver, and see if the computer starts up.
Right, because that's what the switch does, essentially.
Right, just shorts those 2 contacts out.
Right. Okay, so that is a power supply problem.
Also, you can, if you have a reset button, just jump the reset button over to the power button and see if it works. That'll turn the computer on as well.
Oh, right. Good. All right, cool. All right, so say you hook the power supply up, and you turn the computer on, and the computer powers on this time. The lights go on, you hear the fan spinning on the motherboard, but you don't get any video, and you don't get any BIOS, and you don't hear anything besides the fans of the motherboard spinning. In that case, it's usually a bad motherboard. I found not in all cases, but there's a chance that if your power supply goes bad, it might have been because the power supply is old, but it also might have been because the power supply got there was a surge of electricity that maybe like the computer underwent like a bolt of lightning or some kind of surge or shock that it got, and it shorted out the power supply. If that happens, you have a chance also of that surge also getting to the motherboard and wrecking the motherboard too. So it's common that when a power supply goes, the motherboard, it will take the motherboard out with it, or they usually go in tandem. In some cases, it's happened to me. So just check when you replace the power supply. If you're getting the symptoms where the computer powers on, the fan spin, there's no video or BIOS, it's probably a bad motherboard. What do you think, Mike?
I would agree. It's usually a bad motherboard. If you're not, especially if you're not posting, what I usually do, strip the computer down to just the motherboard. You can get video. You should get video. You don't need a hard drive connected. To get video on your screen, you just need the motherboard, the power supply, and RAM. And even if it didn't have RAM, I think it would probably still post, or at least start beeping.
Yeah, it
like
would
crazy.
start beeping at least, right?
So, you just excuse me, disconnect hard drives, CD-ROM drives, all the auxiliary power that's going, because they're, I've seen crazy voltage is a crazy thing, and if a CD-ROM drive, say it's shorting out and spiking the power supply, it could do something. So I usually just play it safe and strip the whole motherboard down to just what it needs to post.
Right. And sometimes the motherboard will actually light up. You'll see the little LED on the motherboard, the little green light. So you think that it's working, but if it's showing those symptoms and maybe the fans are spinning, maybe the fans aren't even spinning on the motherboard, the CPU fan, it's probably a bad motherboard. It's just got to replace the motherboard. And like I said, a lot of times power supply and motherboard go out in conjunction with each other. In my experience, might not happen with you. Okay, let's go on to the next one here. Okay, the computer powers on, you see the boot screen, but then you immediately get an error, like a boot disk error, or an error like that. Have you seen any errors, Mike, where you see the BIOS screen, and the flash screen come up, and then you get an error immediately? Yeah,
it'll say something to the extent of non-system disk, insert system disk and press enter, something to that extent. I just actually had one of those recently. That usually indicates a hard drive problem. To diagnose that first, just go into BIOS and go under your peripherals or your disk drives, wherever it may be located, and see if BIOS is seeing that drive.
Right.
That's where you want to start off first. Now, most of the time, I would say 90 out of 100 times it's probably the hard drive. However, I have seen that message come up if, say, the hard drive wasn't getting power. Because basically that message just says, where's the hard drive? Where's the system disk? It could be because the hard drive's dead. It could be because the hard drive's unpowered.
Right.
So I would check that. More rare cases I've seen that type of symptom, and